This is Jackson County Government Close-Up, your source for news and information from your county government. Join us this hour for in-depth conversation, viewer call-ins, and a chance to meet those in county government working for you.
Good evening and welcome to Jackson County Government Close-Up. I'm Tom Ersepke. Over the next hour, we'll be focusing on the clerk's office, and we've got some good stuff to talk about. You know, I think most people, when they think of the clerk's office, they think of elections, but that's not just it. There's much more to it, so we'll explore deeper. Going digital. Clerk's office is going digital, and more things are being kept digitally and preserved that way, so we'll find out what can and can't be, and we'll also take a rare look down in the basement into the vault, and there's some documents there that go back to the 1800s, so we'll take a sneak peek, a rare look into the clerk's vault and uncover some stuff down there. So it's the clerk's office for the next hour, and time now to introduce our guests. And we'll start with the Jackson County Clerk, Chris Walker. Thanks for being here.
Thank you.
All right, Carmen, she's brought Carmen Hellman, and Carmen is the Recording Department Supervisor, and we've got Donna Connor, Elections Program Manager. Thank you all for being here.
Thanks for having us.
Thanks for having us.
All right, so I think for the most part, when people think about the clerk and what all happens in that department, I'm sure elections come first and foremost. So let's talk elections. What really are you responsible for and in regards to elections?
Of course, in the state of Oregon, we have 4 regularly scheduled elections every year. Doesn't mean we have 4 elections, or we could actually have more, depending on if we have recalls thrown in there, or we could have less, such as this year. But we do have 4 regularly scheduled, one in March, May, September, and November. And in fact, we did have a very small election just yesterday for the city of Gold Hill for a councilor position, and just finished that up last night. The elections department, of course, as you said, is usually in the forefront. It gets a lot of press because of the nature of that department. Very important political process for every American citizen. And we always want our citizens to exercise their right to vote, and we encourage them to do so. Donna here is our elections department program manager. She is the brains behind the operation, and she works for actually 32 years now for Jackson County in the elections department, and does a fantastic job for us.
So you've handled a few elections, have you?
Just a few.
Just a few.
Yesterday's election, probably not labor intensive.
It was, I think, our historic low percentage turnout.
Yes.
I did not realize that was going on. I'm not a Gold Hill resident, but still, yeah. All right, so you were done with it, lickety-split, no problem.
8:50.
Very good. So, Oregon and in Jackson County is vote by mail, right? All that stuff that we get in the mail, that's all handled by you, by your department. Is that right?
Yes, our department, we are actually in charge, of course. We're the filing officer for all the county positions and for districts. Now the cities have filing officers such as their city clerks, but of course we do run the elections process for the entire county. A lot of the cities don't have the ability to have the equipment and pay to run their own elections. So what they do is their candidates file with them, such as city councilors, mayors, things like that. And then of course, our department actually produces the ballot. Donna does a great job with that. And upon those deadlines, we get those ballots printed. It can be very intense time, especially when you're talking presidential elections, which this next year is a presidential election cycle. So it will be a very busy year in our department. We have to get those ballots out on time according to statute. And then, of course, they have to be returned to us on time also so that we can get your ballots counted.
Yeah. Far cry from, you've been doing it for how long, 32 years?
32 years.
Yeah. So way back when, there was a lot more of that Tuesday night drop-off, or, there was always long lines of people dropping off. Not so much anymore as we're doing it by mail. Is that the case?
It's shorter than some of them, but if you've ever seen our drop box at 8 o'clock, there are cars, we have to have traffic cones, and cars are lined up 12, 13 deep, so you still have a little of that last minute.
And we are not polling place anymore, which traditional people would go to the polling places and vote their ballots right there that day. Our ballots go out several weeks in advance before the actual election day. Gives our voters the opportunity to take their time at their leisure at home, and hopefully they study the issues and really educate themselves about the items that are on the ballot, so they can be an informed voter. Submit that ballot in plenty of time, of course by 8 o'clock p.m. Needs to be in a official drop box, county drop box, or in our possession in the clerk's office by 8 o'clock to be accepted. But yes, we do still have long lines, but it's just a little different process. They're waiting to get those in those drop boxes. And we've had them on a presidential election, actually cars lined up all the way from the Community Justice Building, which is where the elections office is housed, down to the courthouse. And so we actually have a sheriff's deputy who will come at 8 o'clock and cut that line off of that last car that's in line making the attempt to vote. So, yeah.
A traffic jam in Medford.
A traffic jam in Medford, yeah. On Main Street even.
Yeah. All right, so other things that the office is responsible for, certainly recording of documents. How big is that, and what kind of documents are we talking about?
In the recording department, we're responsible for deeds and property records. Of course, we do have miscellaneous records also within our department. But we do rely on that for revenue to actually fund all of the clerk's programs. So the recording department is a very essential piece of the makeup of the clerk's office, because those revenues pay for all of our elections process. My budget expectation, or our budget expectation for the budget committee, is that we be 100% self-supporting. And that can be very challenging, especially in the economic times we're in. So of course, our department has seen cutbacks, and we've seen trying to create ways and look at ways of renegotiating contracts. Of course, one of our topics we'll be discussing is digital imaging. That's another way that we can permanently preserve images, but also at a cost savings to the public. Very important, but it can be very challenging in these times. Carmen can testify that with less staff, we still have lots of work to do, and it's very challenging for our staff to be able to handle the workload.
Yeah, certainly. What's your day like?
Well, it's a busy day. We have a lot of recordings that come in, more so now with the e-recording. But yeah, I mean, we record all kinds of documents. They have to do with property. Like Chris said, there's a lot of other miscellaneous things that we do. Marriage licenses. We do a lot of copies. We do searches, different kinds. So yeah, it keeps us busy.
Yeah, no doubt. All right, so marriage license. Your office is a place to find that.
Apply for marriage license.
Correct. Thanks for getting the right word for me. I can get one. All right, that being said, can you go down and get married at the clerk's office?
Yes, we perform that service also. And actually, as of this afternoon, I think I've performed about 635 ceremonies in 3.5 years. So I would question, but I think I probably perform more than any single person in the valley as far as ceremonies go. We provide a nice service for people, but it's also an inexpensive way, especially in this economic environment. People are looking at ways of saving on their budgets also, and this is one way we can provide a service and have a nice complement to start them off well. So we do a lot of marriage ceremonies, sell a lot of marriage licenses. We also have a domestic partnership registry, and that's allowed by state law. We also handle the Board of Property Tax Appeals, which is a program that most people aren't familiar with, except in the climate of the downturn in the housing market. Of course, we see falling values on your market values of your property, but people say my taxes keep going up based on Measure 50. So people do, by law and as a right, can appeal those values and to the Board of Property Tax Appeals. And that is one other program that we do handle within the Clerks Department.
So you get many phone calls in regards to that?
About this time of year we do, because it's almost time for tax statements to go out. We'll certify in October, and then around the end of October, those tax statements will go in the mail, and of course due on November 15th.
Yeah. Do you get people coming in looking for passports, probably some things that you don't handle? So passports is one that you don't handle, correct?
Well, it's kind of funny you mentioned that because we did for several years actually become a passport acceptance facility. We didn't process a passport, but what we did is we would accept it and then send it on to the federal government who would actually issue the passport. And we did love that service. We were customer service-wise, we provide very good customer service to our clients. But what we found is with lessened staff, and also with the nature of how long it took to process those, we were actually finding that our statutory required duties were not being completed in the timely manner we needed them to do. So after going through the departmental performance audits, we actually dropped that program because, quite frankly, it didn't pencil out and it was not producing a revenue like we hoped it would within our department, but also making us fall behind in our statutory duties. Passport processing was actually a federal program, so it's not something we're required to do by Oregon law. But lots of other county clerk's offices do still do those. We in Jackson County found, though, that being our budget expectation is to be self-supporting, it didn't fit in with the criteria that we needed to be able to provide that.
Yeah. Do you find people coming in or making phone calls for other things that you can't handle?
Can't handle.
We get a lot of phone calls for the courts,
Okay.
for the court systems.
Yeah, that's true.
In smaller counties, the county clerk actually can act as the civil court clerk. Once your county gets so large, the statute allows you to, of course, have those split from a circuit court to and the county clerk's office as separate duties. And I'm so glad we don't have to handle the court duties also on top of our other obligations. But we get a lot of phone calls for that. We get phone calls for just about every department within the county unit. But we pride ourselves, and we want to make sure that we're giving the public not just saying, hey, you need to call this department. We'll try to transfer them, we'll get them phone numbers, we'll find out names, try to help them as much as we can, even though it's not something that we would physically do in our department.
Yeah, and a great reference is the website, jacksoncounty.org, and go to the department and you can find out exactly who handles what and what, certainly in regards to the clerk's office, what you do handle. You made some good points earlier in regards to financial and fiscal responsibility and making sure that you're self-supporting. Say that again if you could, because there's fees associated with recording documents and that sort of thing, and that's an important source of revenue for your department to be able to operate. So it's not as if you're throwing fees out there to necessarily feel that's what you're making. You've got a budget and you're trying to meet that budget through the revenue sources, correct?
Correct, and the recording fees sound pretty high. Of course, the average document is about $49 for the first page to record. But of that $49, there's other entities that have pieces of that pie. The clerks get some $8 and some odd cents per document, which go to permanently preserve, to handle all of our programs. So that's the first page. And of course, $5 for each additional page that actually stays with the Clerks Department. We have other departments such as GIS. We have the County Assessment and Taxation. We have the Land Corner Preservation Fee. We also have an Oregon Housing Fee that gets a piece of that pie also. So we actually have one of the smallest pieces of that. Even though we perform all the duties, we record, we permanently preserve those according to archive law. And so we are doing a job for a lot of other entities and actually collecting fees for them to distribute. So of course that they can support their departments and their units also.
Yeah. One area that has helped with meeting that cost efficiency is going digital, and we've mentioned the term e-recording. Give us an idea of what we're talking about here when you say e-recording, because I think most people will expect, well, everything's digital these days. It's an email world, and a lot of our documents are handed back and forth via PDF and emails and that sort of thing. But what are we talking about from a legal standpoint?
Jackson County, actually, I'm very proud of this. We were the first county in the state of Oregon to electronic record about a year and a half ago. Other counties, probably by the end of this year, we will have about 10 counties in the state of Oregon electronic recording documents. Now, what does that mean to the consumer? We are providing a service via a scanned image transmitted to us through a recording portal. We have two places that we have contracts with. One is called Simplifile and the other is in Geo. But we would be open to any other portals that would wish to have a contract with us to provide those services. Their submitters would actually submit a document through that portal. It then transmits through an interface to our recording system, and it shows up as a digital image. And we actually digitally record that document without ever physically handling a paper document on our end. The digital recording label is put on it. All the fees are handled through ACH, which is Automated Clearinghouse. Works well. It's almost instantaneous. It saves 2/3 of the time as it would to process a paper document. We're not handling paper. We're not having mailing costs. It really is a win-win all the way around, and it is definitely what's happening nationwide. We were the first in Oregon, but there's some 400 other counties around the country that are e-recording. Now, Carmen, how many documents? What's our
There's
approximate
probably
per day?
an average of around 100 a day now.
And you're handling a majority of those, or you got the team there that certainly handles all
Well,
of that?
the whole staff.
Yeah.
Yeah. All of us are working all the time on them. And you just have to keep a good eye on them and, process them as they come in. And they're out like that.
And you, obviously, you've done the recording side now, and do you have a preference? Do you like handling paper? Do you like doing it the old way, or?
I like the e-recording.
Yeah.
Yeah, you don't handle the paper. The monies are taken care of through Simplifile and Geo.
Yeah.
They handle all of the funding. So it's just a matter of looking at the document, because they'll enter the information. You have to just verify that by the image of the document. And cross all your T's and dot your I's and
course,
making sure it's okay and send it off. And
Very good.
it's very slick.
Yeah.
Of course, keep in mind, even though it's e-recorded, it still has to meet all the statutory requirements that are required by law, of whether it was a paper document or a scanned e-record image. So what we want our people to know that we are taking the care as we would, whether if it was brought in over the counter, through the mail, or e-recorded. And that's to ensure that all the proper safeguards are met and that it's a legal document.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's take a closer look at e-recording and see how Chris, Carmen, and the team take care of our documents digitally.
We're here in the Jackson County Clerk's office. And of course, a huge part of the clerk's programs is the deeds and property records. We record documents here. Traditionally, we've always done paper documents, which of course the statutes required that everything be recorded paper-wise. We'd mail them over the counter, record over the counter. The title companies would bring their documents in. We'd record, get documents through the mail, things of that nature. In this day and age, we are also e-recording. Now, you might ask, what's e-recording? E-recording is electronic recording. I'm very proud to say that here in Jackson County, we were the first county in the state of Oregon to e-record. Very nice distinction. We have legislation that backs that process up. So we're very excited that the rest of the state is now following suit. We have about 7 counties lined up right now. They're going to start e-recording also. So how does a person e-record? We have a contract with our recording system provider. So let's say a particular submitter, such as a title company, decides, hey, we want to start this e-record process. What they would do is they would contact Simplifile or NGO, and they would become a contractor with them. Once they are set up and ready to go through our system, they would then have, let's say, a client come in and they're purchasing a piece of property. Of course, there's several documents that are going to need to be signed, which would traditionally be brought into us in paper format. What they will do now is they can take a scanner, or they can actually have a copier that actually will scan and attach like PDF files. They can actually take those, scan those documents in, which meet statutory requirement according to Oregon law, and then they can actually submit those via this web-based program right here to the county clerk's office in digital format. When we receive that document, we get a notification, kind of a little ghost image comes up and says, you have e-records waiting to record. We basically, simple as taking our mouse, clicking on those ghost images, bringing those documents up. We review them just as we would a paper document that's brought over the counter, make sure that all the statutory requirements are met, make sure that they're indexed properly. We hit finalize, it's recorded. It automatically puts a digital label, which shows the recording label, the recording number, date and time, the county clerk's office, where that was recorded at, and then via the web, it goes right back to them. The biggest help in this is it takes about 1/3 of the time to do an e-record as it does to do a traditional recorded paper document. Now in this day and age, we've all experienced cutbacks. Title companies, county clerk's office, every realm of the housing market has had cutbacks because of the economic situation. And every business, quite frankly, out there here in our county has seen some sort of downturn in their revenues. We're no different. So this came as a great piece for us because what it did is in reduced staffing, we could take and provide the same service at a much quicker, more efficient manner. And then what we do is just how do you pay for this document? Well, these are already pre-set up ACH transfers, which automatic clearinghouse. The banking is all taken care of automatically too. So we never really see any tangible physical piece of that. What we do is it's all handled internally and we get those transfers. So it's very secure and we don't have to worry about handling the cash that comes in over the counter either. It's made us more efficient. It's made us a better department.
We have a closer look at how the e-recording happens inside the clerk's office. One question I have is, being an electronic world, and we've been doing email for 10, 12, 13, 14 years, it's pretty common. So I look at that and I think, well, why haven't we been doing something like that for a longer period of time? There's got to be a reason why it seems like just now. And you'd mentioned Jackson County is the first county to start doing this. Why has it taken so long to get there?
It all depends on your state laws. It depends on what the legislature decides to do. You've got to have a concept, you need to have a bill, and you need to have support for that. If you don't have support for a bill, it's not going to pass into law. Within e-recording, we actually did have a suit brought against us for this, but we ended up having a legislative bill that was brought forth before this last legislative session, and I'm very happy to say that that passed without an assenting vote. All of the senators and, of course, the House knew that this was important technology, that this was something in the future, and very proud that was passed and signed by the governor. It had an emergency clause, so it went into effect immediately upon signing by the governor. And I can happily say that the very next day, all of our title companies were recording, e-recording immediately. We actually went from about 20% of our documents being e-recorded in that first year to almost overnight 65 to 70% of our incoming documents being done digitally. So it really shows you that it's exciting technology, and people, title companies, they want this to happen. They all have cutbacks, as I stated, in the production, that there's not an entity out there who hasn't seen reduction in revenues. And we're all looking at ways to save money, not only for our departments, but also for the taxpayers. We have an obligation to spend their money as wisely and as smartly as we can. And this is just one other way that we're being very mindful about trying to save the taxpayers money and to spend their dollars wisely.
Are any documents not done this way any longer? As far as what we're talking about, deeds and dealing with title companies and that sort of thing, are they done manually by hand any longer?
They're still coming through the mail.
Okay. All right.
And over the counter.
Right, and over
Yeah.
the counter.
And do you give them a funny look and say, don't,
No, it's kind of nice to do both. You
Yeah.
know, variety's always good, but of course, e-recording's my favorite.
Yeah.
We'll probably always record the standard paper documents because, of course, we have clients that don't have the technology to be able to submit a digital document. So we always want to be mindful that we want to accommodate all of our customers and all of our citizens however we can.
Yeah. Family Search. I read something about it, and we've talked about it. Family Search is a nonprofit organization funded by the LDS Church. How was that organization able to help out Jackson County? What do they do?
We were approached, actually now it's been a couple years ago, it seems like, or at least over a year ago, and we were approached by people that were service to the organization, and they had mentioned the program to me, sat in my office one day just kind of explaining what they wanted to do. Of course, Family Search does a huge business for people doing genealogical research about families, about their history. Part of that is getting these old deed indexes, getting the historic marriage licenses, because on those, there's a lot of information that can be used for people doing genealogical research. So when we were approached about it, it took a while to get the contracts in place because, of course, I submit those to council. I have no signing authority on contracts. And, of course, they're going to review them to make sure that the county's covered liability-wise. There's nothing that's going to put us in a bind if we allow them to do this. Now, it was a win-win on both sides because not only did they get those images to be able to index on the Family Search website, we also received hard drives of all of those digital images to where my goal is to get those converted onto our current marriage licensing system so that instead of having to go to those old microfilm rolls, we can take and actually pull them up right on the computer system. So it would take conversion to get those on there and to be able to get indexes. But we did do this same project with all of our deeds. And so we actually have all of our deed indexes on the computer back to the 1850s that you can go right in, have a volume and page in a historic search and pull those images up right on our computer system. So that eventually is our goal in this, is to be able to get those on that system, thus providing more transparency for those documents. It's easier for a customer to come in. They can go right to the computer themselves and pull those images. And quite frankly, with the lesson staff, it releases my staff to be able to do the recordings and the other things involved in the office. But of course, we always aid if a person comes in and doesn't know how to run our system. We'll be happy to help them try to figure out how to find those documents. But really interesting technology.
As far as the certifieds, the marriages, we do a lot of marriages in the office. We certify copies for them a lot too, and that it'd just be so much easier, quicker for the customer too.
So this organization came in certainly for their benefit. They wanted for their background, and so when people come to them and look for genealogical information, so they came to Jackson County and said, "Can we access your information?" And by doing that, they scanned it all and said, "Hey, we'll give it back to you, copies as well to have for your records."
Right. The digital images are great. Now, from what I understand, of course, the system is upgrading to Windows 7. That'll give us greater capability with those operating systems to be able to accommodate putting these images on there, because they are a color image is what they're considered. I'm not a techie, but there's black and white and color. From what I understand, and after speaking to our recording system provider, they really want us to be able to use these, who also handles our marriage system. And so once we get these new technology in, we can take and actually start that process of getting those put within our computer system. The hard part is getting the indexes, because quite frankly, you might have the raw data, but you have to give a customer a way to be able to find that data. So it's being able to index those so you can easily search and find those records.
Yeah.
And that will take manpower and time to do. But we are working on that, and it might take some time, but we're hoping to get those on the system.
I would say you're a techie if you know there's black and white and there's color.
That's what I was told.
Moving on from that, well, hold on. Before I move on, I did want to bring up microfilm. You said microfilm, and it somewhat made me laugh. So we still have that technology out there to where you're referencing some old documents that way. Do we even have microfilm viewers out there still?
We have 3 in our department. We
Okay.
have 1 in elections because
Okay.
we have old microfilm images of old voter registration cards because we had to preserve those images also. So we do have 1 in elections department. And we actually have 2 in the recording office, actually 1 upstairs because they rarely get used. And then 1 down in the basement we keep. So when we have items down there, we can actually view those there also. But you are right, very archaic technology. But up to this point, it's been the only thing that's been acceptable for permanent preservation. Of course, our records have to be able to have the test of permanent preservation or 100-year test. So what the Secretary of State is actually doing is they are looking at ways based on directive or law that they can actually make the new technology as a preferred or as an acceptable way of maintaining and keeping these archivable images. So I'm very much looking forward to that happening. In fact, right now we're in conversations with, of course, our IT department and different technologies about trying to get those permanent preservation methods. Of course, they want certain criteria, Department of Defense approved. There's certain, and again, I'm not a techie, but certain things that need to happen before it would be acceptable according to the state archivist.
Yeah.
We are right on the verge of that, and that
Yeah.
is happening right now.
Yeah.
And hopefully, with that technology moving in place, Jackson County can move forward and again save thousands
Yeah.
of dollars in a year on not producing microfilm but storing them digitally.
And that truly is the key, is the cost savings and that
Yes.
sort of thing that gets passed along to Jackson County citizens. All right, we'll go back to elections. We hit a little bit on elections earlier. Yesterday we had an election, but you wouldn't necessarily know it. We had one in May. We'll have one in November, or no? Not going to have one in November.
Will not have a November election.
That's got to be strange.
It's very odd.
Yeah. Why aren't we having one?
What are your feelings on that, Donna?
It may sound like a dumb question, but I haven't worked in the department.
Nobody filed any measures.
Okay.
We've seen a decline in certain measures, the economy, just how many more taxes can people pay? So a lot of the cities and districts are waiting for like a primary or a general, so that the cost of putting on an election is so high, if they can consolidate it in the spring, it's more cost effective to them.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I think people are thinking more seriously. There's also a lot of issues that people aren't voting for sidewalks and greenways and water fountains, that sort of thing. There's a real cutback in what people can afford right now, and so
believe that to be true. That's pretty much my opinion of it too. Is that it has to do with every time a city or a district or an entity comes on with a ballot measure. Of course, let's just say it doesn't pass or it does pass. Either way, those still have to be paid for, the election costs, and election costs can be very expensive. To front a county-wide election or front a district election.
and just the increased taxes to
And
the voter
Right.
and the citizen. And so we need fire stations and things like that, but it's just tougher as people have to cut back, everything has to be cut back.
Yeah, that does make sense. That being said, you still are making preparations for what will be a big election year in 2012. What is the department doing in regards to that? Updating equipment, or what's going on?
We're always, actually, the Secretary of State right now is very proactive. We have HAVA dollars, which is the Help America Vote Act. Federal funds that provide for new equipment, things like that. So we are getting some replacement equipment. We had new printers. We added a couple 24-hour drop sites. We are actually looking into hopefully getting funds to replace our ballot tabulating machines, which are not, in the scheme of things, we haven't had them that long. But your ballot tabulators actually have to go through a very long process, usually 5+ years of approvals through the Elections Administration Commission. And then they have to be approved through the state also. So by the time you get the technology, it's 5 to 8 years old. So quite frankly, we have good machines, good equipment, but we can always make that better. And we have these HAVA dollars that are to be spent, and we're hoping Jackson County will be the recipient of being able to get some of this new equipment, hopefully in the next year or two. But of course, that being said, we're in the middle of redistricting too, and based on the legislature actually redrawing those lines, and very impressive that they were able to do that. It's not real common that gets accomplished in a legislative session with the partisan nature of the legislature. But they did accomplish that this year, and that was really a huge thing for them. And of course, Donna is busy getting all those maps done and looking at the addresses and the new precincts, and that all has to be done by the end of January, of course, because we have a presidential election cycle coming up this next year. Do you have any?
How often are the district lines redrawn?
Every 10 years, we have the census, and so the legislative lines can change that frequently. We sometimes realign our precincts in between that if they grow too big. We used to do a lot more of that when we had polling elections, because the neighborhoods and the districts kind of went with the areas, but we do that less now. But precincts can only get so large by statute, so you still might split mid-year. You try not to, because it is disruptive, but.
We've talked about technology and trying to be up with technology.
Mm-hmm.
What about from an election standpoint? We vote by mail now.
Mm-hmm.
What about voting online, or people are choosing to communicate differently, whether it's mobile devices or via email or online, and get their information that way? How close are we to doing that? Any idea?
My opinion on that is I believe it's a generational gap, and you have different generations. I just posed that question to my son the other night and asked him if you had a secure way to vote on an iPad or on your computer, would you do it? And he said, absolutely. But of course, my son's from the era, they never had polling place elections. And I remember them. I was young, but I do remember them. But I think as our generations move forward, we have that technology right in our faces, and it's going to happen. Now, to get there needs to be legislative changes. Again, just like when we moved to vote by mail, it was in our Constitution, it was voted on by the people. And this would be the same thing. It would have to be something that the people would vote on. Mm-hmm. But whether we want it or not, eventually it will happen. It's one of those things that is inevitable to happen.
Our most exciting one right now, actually, is that our military and our out-of-country people, only recently they were granted legislation so that they could actually, if we email them ballots, they could fax them back to us with some waiver privacy things. And that was cumbersome for them. Not many service people would have fax machines, but now the legislature has just passed so that they can actually make PDFs and email those ballots back to us with all the proper. So 2012 is going to be a lot easier for a lot of service and people and out-of-country people. Mm-hmm. But it's taken a lot of work just to get that through, because email is not private, and that's been one of the major issues with ballots.
Mm-hmm. And that took a legislative change. That was in this last legislative cycle, was actually approved by that. And like Donna said, very important for our military and overseas voters. It gives them the opportunity, if you're in a remote location, how many people have a fax out in the middle of the desert? Quite frankly, they do have access to email. And so those are things that we always want our military and overseas voters to be able to vote, and try to make it accommodating to wherever they're at.
Yeah, it certainly makes sense to me, no doubt about it. Let's get back to documentation and that sort of thing. Recording documents by paper and that sort of thing for a long, long time. So you certainly have to hang on to that stuff, right?
Yes.
All right. So there's a lot of stuff that they've been hanging on to. And we were able to, earlier this week, go into the vault and see some old documents that go back into the 1800s. So I want to give an opportunity for you now to check out our trip into the clerk's vault.
Well, we're here in the basement of the Jackson County Courthouse. We're going to enter into the vault that houses the county clerk's historical records. lot of people don't know, but we actually act as a historical society for all of the county records. So we're going to go ahead and walk on into this vault. As you can see, this is a very old vault door. These were established in this building, of course, upon construction of the annex area. There are some older vaults within the main part of the building, but this is the one in the basement that houses our historical documents. Nothing special about it, but it is secure and falls under standards, of course, to protect documents. So we're going to go ahead and go this way.
Are there a lot of other vaults down here as well?
There are. The old building actually houses quite a few vaults. What happened was back before courier services, when the taxes were taken in, or such things as the County Sheriff's Department actually was housed in this building. And of course they had weapons and things that they had to house and keep in a secure area. So this old building actually has quite a few old vaults that are in it. We happen to use this one just to house our historical documents, so it really serves its purpose well for at least the county clerk's office now. Okay, and as you can see, the vault's here, but we don't know the combination to it. So what we did is we have the guts taken out of it, but it still maintains a secure locking environment. So of course we want to keep that nature of that vault intact so that it protects those documents that are in there. We're just going to open this up, the big old heavy door, and we'll turn on the light. And here is our vault. Go on inside. So what we have here, quite a few old documents. Now, of course, we do have a contracted service that we do to house the majority of the records for the entirety of the county. But in here, what we do is this is specific to the county clerk's records. We try to keep in our vault things that are commonly pulled or used by our citizens. And so, of course, right here on these first shelves, these big old boxes here, we have lots of the old, and actually continuing on to the back shelves, the historic marriage documents that from original first marriage ever sold here in Jackson County in this box number 1. Not a real tough system. It just goes from box 1, the oldest, to the newest. And so those documents actually go back to the 1800s. And we actually have all the old medical certificates, because back then you actually had to provide a medical certificate. That ended sometime in the 1970s. But of course, we have all of the original records here, right in these boxes. So what's in here, again, it's not rocket science. We just take and we have everything done by volume and pages, and all the historic documents are here. I could go here and I can actually pull this document out. And of course on the front it's going to show the names of the parties with the marriage. This particular document was done July 5th of 1897. And these records are actually maintained very well. They're kept very well. And this is of course the marriage certificate of this particular couple.
Back in the 1890s.
1890s on this particular document.
How long do you have to keep this stuff? Is this stuff more for historical, or do you really still need to have these documents?
These are for historical use, and we get a lot of people in trying to do genealogical research. People just trying to look up old family members. They might hear of an old story and they want to see an original document. But the other thing we do get is, because we did issue the license, we can actually certify copies of these for folks to take to Social Security, to get a passport if they have to come up with documentation to show name changes or things of that nature that might happen. So we do actually use these documents quite a bit. Of course, the older they get, the more you don't. There are laws according to the Oregon Revised Statutes for archive and preservation. And the state archivist is very thorough in coming down about every 5 years to make sure that we are maintaining records. And of course, they have a list to find in our records that shows that we are maintaining these things and in a proper fashion. They were very happy to find out that we did have at least a vault for some of these records because, of course, these are original documents. We further house a lot more at our contracted service, but of course here we want to make sure that the integrity of these documents are held. And at this point they're more of a historical document, so it's important to keep those. Behind us here, as you can see, it's a plat cabinet, and these are historical plat documents for Jackson County. Now, originally, of course, the county seat was in Jacksonville. And when the courthouse was built here, they moved everything from Jacksonville into Medford. So we've heard rumors through the years that when that move took place, that some documents were just laid out on the front lawn. People could take and keep what they wanted. Of course, that's just hearsay. But we also heard things such as there could have been fires or just people lost documents. But this is what we have maintained since that time. And as you can see, these are all done in order here. They're all maintained in these old sleeves, what we call them. And of course, I can pull one out here and I'll be able to show you. These were a lot of hand-done plat items here. This particular plat, you find a date on this, was actually done in 1909. And you can see this date here, March 3rd, 1909. And this is Orchard Home Company plat. Probably right here in the city of Medford, I imagine.
And again, you're keeping these?
The statutes have not kept up a lot with technology. We have ways of preserving these digitally, which is kind of what our current project with the marriage documents were. But what happens is that the statutes have to follow the technology, and right now permanent preservation methods have not accepted digital as a permanent preservation through the statutes in Oregon. They're working on that though, and it looks like we're right on that verge because I know the Secretary of State's office, Archives Division, has developed a program out there where we can get acceptable standards for permanent preservation. It really opened up a huge realm for us, especially at the county level, because right now we're producing microfilm that we can maintain in an off-site location, which would suffice the permanent preservation standards. Once we can go to digital, it will not only be more accessible because we'll have those all right on our computer systems, but it'll also save the taxpayers a huge amount of money because to produce microfilm is very, very costly. It doesn't get used a lot anymore. It's archaic technology. So bringing us into the digital future is going to save the citizens a huge amount of money once we can get that technology going, and it is an accepted practice for permanent preservation. And we're right there, it's going to happen, and it is happening right now. So anyway, these are the oldest plats we have here in Jackson County. And as you can see, looking down the line, we have quite a few of these plat cabinets here that take you basically through the history. The plat cabinets, we do them by year. Every time a new plat is filed, we give it a number so that you can, of course, research and find those documents. And then we permanently maintain the original plat right here. Here we have some old mortgage indexes. Now, mind you, these are just a few of them. We do have lots more out at our archives contract. I have, in particular, these we maintain, and because of their historical heritage behind them. And this here, you can see this volume. It's a record volume. It's a beautiful old leather-bound edition. This is volume 1 from 1861 to 1866. This is the oldest commissioner's journal that we have in Jackson County. It is actually a leather, like it's a beautiful leather-bound. It's seeing some wear, of course, because it is over 100 and some odd years old. But inside, you can see it's going to have exhibits. Here's the date that it was. This entire book was microfilmed, so it has actually been put on microfilm. But within here, it's going to show you, here's the original entries, the July session, 1861 in Jacksonville, and the Board of Jackson County, State of Oregon, and it talks about they met in this day, and of course this is all of the notes that were taken during that session of the Board of Commissioners. So it's kind of neat. These are actually in very good condition for being as old as they are. They're all handwritten. And we do maintain these in here, along with all kinds of other records. So this was a particular interest because of the nature of its age. And once again, we're maintaining these 4 historical preservations for the county. Let's see, more marriage licenses, of course, because we've had over 100 years of marriage documents, so we do have the rest of those in here. We come back this way, and we are looking at, of course, some boxes of old liens. We occasionally will have to search. Back before computer systems, we had to do everything in paper format, so you really had to have access to those. We still, believe it or not, from even 20 years ago, have people trying to find old liens that are still, when they go to refinance their property, they show an old Jackson County warrant, or they might show a federal tax lien or a construction lien. Of course, all those documents have time frames where they can be released off the property. The person's paid them off, the person who liened them have the obligation to release that lien, but sometimes that doesn't happen. So we do have to search these records periodically. So we keep these right on site because, again, when you use them a lot, we would have to actually pay to have them shipped back and forth to our other preservation office. So it helps having them right here for us. Keep in mind, these cabinets, this is another reason why digital storage is going to be so important for the future. This big green plat cabinet over here, not including shipping, is about $8,000 to purchase one of those. And when we have to do that every so many years, it's very expensive for budgets, and of course that is taxpayer money. We want to be very mindful. We're trying to find ways to not only spend the taxpayer dollars more efficiently, but to be more efficient in our department also. These are coroner's inquests, and these are of very historic nature. As you can see, this box right here, box 2 of 2, inquest 1911 to 1930. Of course, these are coroner's inquest. The coroner acted almost as like an investigator does nowadays, or would be a forensics investigator. They would take, and when there was a scene of a unknown death or a questionable death, they would of course go to that scene and investigate to find out what happened. As your current sheriff, state police, you have all kinds of different departments that'll do that now, but back during this time, it was left up to a coroner to do that work. This box here is our oldest box, and in this box, just let me set that, just put it up here. In this box, as you can see right here, they have habeas corpus, and they also have the coroner's inquest. The dates of these are 1859 to 1910. These read like Old West movie scripts. I pulled one in particular. I had a customer come in who'd heard stories on down their family lineage about a murder that had happened actually up on Wagner Creek Road in Talent. And that really spurred my interest because I grew up in Talent. And so we pulled the boxes, actually had these brought in, and looked through the actual document, and like I said, read like an Old West movie script. There had been a murder, it was a family scandal, and in the end, I believe it said in that document, it took the coroner 3 or 5 days to be able to get to that home to do this inquest. Because of course, back in that time frame, there were no such thing as cars, so they had to take the old horse and buggy, and when they could get up there, then do the investigation. And they're quite interesting. And these documents are seeing a little wear and tear, a little aging in them. I'll pull one out here. Okay. So this right here, it's going to have the coroner's inquest. It talks about the person who passed away, shows when it was filed, and then of course testimony of the witnesses. You open these up, this is where they've seen their age. They've been folded up so long that it's really hard to kind of get those all straightened out. As you can see, it's just it's an accounting of what we would do now on a computer, and it takes them through, as you can see, rather thick of the whole scenario of what happened to this person and what caused their death. I've been very fortunate. I've kind of thumbed through some of these every once in a while, and you go through the different ages. And when there was a huge movement of settlers coming to the valley, of course, a lot of their only way to get here was either by horse and buggy by train, when the trains actually, when they got the railroads laid through. And there are quite a few in here of people that they would find a body that had been mutilated. They'd been riding a squatter on the train and had actually fallen off, and then of course not until they discovered that body. And it's unfortunate because those people actually were never known. You know, they never would find out who those people were, but I assume they were settlers trying to make a better life for themselves, to come to the West and possibly start a new family and create a life for themselves. So some of them are very sad in nature. It was also a point when cars came into place. There were some that I found in there that the husbands would be trying to get the old car started, and of course they'd have the wives go up and crank the car, and the brakes would be released and they'd run them over. So as you could see that the different eras of technology would actually portray a lot of these coroner's inquests. So kind of unique. It was kind of it's kind of neat to be able to look through these and see the history of them.
So there you have it, a look inside the vault at the clerk's office underground. And I get the sense that you could spend hours upon hours, if you haven't already, down there going through that stuff. You generally love what's down there, huh?
I love history in general, and I have a lot of history here in Jackson County, and it's fascinating to look through some of these old documents. And I actually found one that was in a box we had in our vault, and it actually had an original signature by Peter Applegate. And I've just found that because, of course, Applegate was established after this family, and it gives you a sense of just history and belonging in your community when you see these, that we actually do act per se as a historical society for the Jackson County records. And I'm very proud that we have made an effort to preserve those records for our citizens and for historical research.
Yeah.
Okay.
And Carmen, you were saying as that we were airing that your great-grandfather was out there on horse and buggy?
Yep, took the census up Forest Creek Road.
So,
Yeah.
Yeah,
What year
okay.
was that?
I don't know the year. I just found this out. So
Okay.
so
you certainly have some.
Not on a daily basis, but oftentimes we go over to the old index books, and I'm always finding a family member or something, and so I look forward to the time that I can spend a lot of time on that.
Yeah.
Research that.
Yeah, and you certainly have some history as well with your great-grandfather, August Singler.
Yes, he was actually elected sheriff in 1912. And then in 1913, unfortunately, was shot and killed in the line of duty in Jacksonville. From what I understand, it was in the area of where the old closed now dump used to be. It was back in early 1900s. There was a cabin up there, and he actually went up to serve a warrant on a petty thief named Lester Jones, and Lester opened fire on Grandpa, mortally wounding him. Grandpa shot back, and he died immediately. And then Grandpa died the next day at the hospital, but left 8 children, and kind of gave the legacy here in the valley of my mother's family. So it's a sad story,
Yeah.
but it's one that I'm proud of my great-grandfather, and his portrait hangs in my office today.
Yeah, very good. And you're able to go down and look back. You even showed, I believe, where your grandparents got married as we were going through some of those documents. Is that right? You were looking up the date, and it happened to be the day after JFK was shot. Is that correct?
Yeah, it was actually my parents.
Excuse me. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, and they actually were married the day after JFK was shot.
Yeah.
And and so I even pulled that for you guys and showed that I can look up in the index and actually find their actual marriage license in a matter of minutes. Now, doing it digitally, once we get those indexes set, it'll even be faster than that.
All right. Good segue as we wrap up here. We got about a minute and a half. The clerk's office is going more towards digital preservation and that sort of thing, and that certainly is a big savings to the taxpayer. I do want to bring that up again because I think that's really besides accessibility and being able to find it without having to go through, rifle through all that stuff. Really, that's what the important piece is to the Jackson County residents. Yeah.
Moves us into the future. Although technology does have its costs also, but for continuing into the next centuries, we always want to be able to provide services, and we have to keep up on the technology, because when certain technologies go away, we have to be able to preserve the past to bring us into the future.
Yeah, very good. All right, well, that's just going to about do it. Any last thoughts? Any comments we haven't gotten in?
You know, one good thing we want to remind people, big election year coming up. Make sure you get out and register to vote early. We encourage all of our citizens who are eligible to make sure that they exercise that right to vote. Of course, we always encourage people to, if they need to come in and do historical research, purchase a home, you'll come and see us at some point. So,
All right, very good.
great.
Outstanding. All right, well, thanks for spending the hour with us. My thanks to Chris Walker, Carmen Hellman, and Donna Connor. Thank you very much from the clerk's office for being here. And that's going to do it. As always, you know, our goal with this show, this program, is to help you better understand what's going on in the Jackson County government and to give you a closer look. Thanks for watching this past hour, and we will see you next time. Good night.